María del Rosio Rosie Alfaro was sentenced to death on July 14, 1992, for the murder of a 9-year-old girl during a burglary and robbery in Anaheim, California, on June 15, 1990. Alfaro, who was 18 and pregnant with twins at the time of the murder, stabbed the 9-year-old 57 times. María del Rosio Rosie Alfaro, in July 2002, became the first woman sentenced to death in Orange County, when she was condemned for stabbing to death 9-year-old Autumn Wallace more than 50 times during a June 15, 1990, burglary in Anaheim to get money for drugs. Autumn was alone, cutting out paper dolls when she heard a knock on the door and saw Alfaro, her older sister's acquaintance. In an interview years later, Alfaro said she had to kill Autumn because the girl knew who she was. Linda Wallace, Autumn's mother, found her daughter's body hours later in a pool of blood in the bathroom. Rosie Alfaro is an American female murderer, currently on California's death row for the 1990 murder of 9-year-old Autumn Wallace in Anaheim, California. Autumn Wallace, the victim, allowed Alfaro inside the home as she recognized Alfaro as a past guest on numerous occasions and an acquaintance of her older sister. When Alfaro arrived and asked if she could come inside to use the restroom, Autumn was home alone, waiting for her sister and mom to return from work. Alfaro, who was 18 years old, pregnant, and high on cocaine and heroin, needed another fix, burgled the Wallace home, ultimately to garner cash to enable her to purchase drugs. When Alfaro originally planned to approach the Wallace home, she did not expect to find anyone home. When she saw Autumn at home, she then realized she would have to kill her, because she would know who committed the burglary. Alfaro stabbed Autumn 57 times and then proceeded to take anything and everything of apparent value. She later changed her original confession and stated that an unidentified male accomplice forced her to start stabbing the girl, and then he finished the slaying. Alfaro has never identified the male. Police and the Orange County prosecutor say he never existed. Alfaro was raised in the barrio in Anaheim, California, near Disneyland. She became a drug addict at 13, a prostitute at 14, a single mom at 15, and a mother to 4 children at 18. Eventually, she became a murderer at 18 while pregnant with twins, and the first woman in Orange County, California, to get the death penalty at $20. On June 15, 1990, Autumn Wallace, age 9, was home alone in Anaheim, California, waiting for her older sister and mother to return home from work. Rosie Alfaro was high on cocaine and heroin and needed a fix. She knew the Wallace family and was friendly with one of the older daughters. She thought they were out and that she would be able to steal items from the home to sell so she could get her fix. Autumn opened the door for Alfaro, her sister's friend, who asked to use the restroom. She took a knife from the kitchen before proceeding to the restroom at the back of the house. She then coaxed Autumn into the bathroom on a ruse and stabbed her over 50 times. Alfaro then ransacked the house for anything she could steal, ultimately to acquire drug money. The stolen property was later sold for less than $300. Alfaro confessed to the crime during a police-taped interview, stating she was high on heroin and cocaine when she stabbed Autumn. Later, she changed her story and alleged an unidentified man forced her to stab the little girl. Still later, Alfaro told police that 2 men drove her to the Wallace home, and one of the men came into the house and forced her to kill Autumn. She refused to identify the man. The evidence from the crime scene indicated that only members of the Wallace family and Alfaro, based on her fingerprints and a matched blood-stained shoe print, were present in the home that day. She was tried and convicted of first-degree murder, with special circumstances. At the end of the penalty phase of the trial, the jury deadlocked 10-2 on the sentence of death. The penalty phase of the trial was then declared a mistrial. A second jury unanimously voted to recommend the death penalty. The trial judge upheld the jury's recommendation and sentenced Alfaro to death. In August 2007, the California Supreme Court voted unanimously to uphold Alfaro's death sentence. Santa Ana María del Rosio, Rosie. Alfaro was a drug addict at 13, a prostitute at 14, a single mom at 15, and a murderer at 18. She grew up in Anaheim hustling for cocaine and heroin. On June 15, 1990, Alfaro desperately needed money for her next fix when she tricked 9-year-old Autumn Wallace into letting her inside the family residence in Anaheim Hills. Autumn, a smiling pixie with blonde hair, was home alone, cutting out paper dolls when she heard the knock on the door and saw Rosie, an acquaintance of her older sister. In a jailhouse interview years later, Alfaro said she had to kill Autumn because the little girl knew who she was. Linda Wallace, Autumn's mom, found the body of her little girl hours later in a pool of blood in the bathroom. She had been stabbed 57 times. The Wallace home had been ransacked and the property was missing, including a portable television, a typewriter, a telephone, and a Nintendo set. Alfaro sold all of it for $300. In 1992, Alfaro became the first and only female sentenced to death by an Orange County judge. It took 15 years, but today, the Wallace family finally received the news they had been waiting for. The California Supreme Court unanimously affirmed the death sentence given in 1992 to an Anaheim woman who killed a 9-year-old girl, Autumn Wallace, in 1990 during a burglary. Appeals. For María del Rosio, Rosie Alfaro, now 35, who was the first woman in Orange County to get the death penalty, will now enter the federal court system. And that process, too, can take years to conclude. Alfaro was a high school friend of Autumn's older sister, who talked the little girl alone into opening her door on June 15, 1990. Alfaro later admitted to killing the little girl to eliminate a witness. Autumn was stabbed 57 times, and her body was found in a pool of blood by her mother, Linda, when she returned home from work. The judge, who upheld the jury's recommendation, called Autumn Wallace's murder the most senseless, brutal, vicious, and callous killing he has ever known. Santa Ana, a 20-year-old mother of 4, became the first Orange County woman condemned to death row when a Superior Court judge on Tuesday sentenced her to die in the gas chamber for the fatal stabbing of a 9-year-old girl during a burglary. In upholding a jury's recommendation that María Rosie del Rosio Alfaro of Anaheim be sentenced to death for the slaying of Autumn Wallace, Judge Theodore E. Millard denounced the murder as the most senseless, brutal, vicious, and callous killing he has ever known. The sentence will automatically be appealed to higher courts. A jury in March convicted Alfaro of first-degree murder during a burglary and robbery, but the same jury deadlocked 10-2 in favor of recommending the death sentence for the June 15, 1990, murder of Autumn in her Anaheim home. The young girl was stabbed 57 times and left to bleed to death on a bathroom floor. A second jury last month unanimously recommended the death sentence after a retrial of the penalty phase. Tuesday, relatives of the victim and the defendant sobbed as two mothers, one fighting on behalf of her child's memory and the other for her daughter's life, addressed the court. Her voice breaking Linda Wallace, 42, told Millard that during the trial, her daughter was known simply as a young victim stabbed to death by someone she trusted. She said she wanted everyone to know Autumn was more than just a name. Her blonde-haired, brown-eyed daughter was an A student who loved swimming and fishing and wanted to be an artist when she grew up. Wallace said she lives the nightmare daily of what Autumn went through the last moments of her life. She said she wants Alfaro to pay for her crime by being executed. Alfaro's mother, Sylvia Alfaro, 38, implored the judge to spare her daughter from the death sentence. "The first time I came here, I felt like I was sitting in the electric chair," she cried. "I beg you, please forgive my daughter and what she did." She broke down and ran from the courtroom. At the same time, Linda Wallace closed her eyes and wiped away her tears. Wallace said afterward that Alfaro's death sentence had finally given her peace. Her life has been in limbo since the day she came home from work and found her daughter's body in a pool of blood, she said. "What Alfaro did was horrible. I will never forgive or forget her," Wallace said. As for Sylvia Alfaro, "I feel for her because I know what it's like to lose a daughter." As he has done throughout the trial, Alfaro's attorney, William M. Monroe, reasserted his client's claim of innocence. He asked that Millard reconsider Alfaro's youth, her drug addiction, as well as her being a mother of 4 young boys, and send her to prison instead of the gas chamber. The jury, he claimed, made a mistake in their recommendation. Millard dismissed the claims, saying that Alfaro made her own choices in life, and that she could not blame her actions on others. Furthermore, the judge added that based on the evidence presented in court, he is doubtful that Alfaro could adequately care for her children. Monroe said outside of court that he felt racial misconceptions played a vital role in the minds of the jurors who recommended the death penalty. He claimed that Alfaro's predominantly white jury could not empathize, understand, or relate to the plight of a Latino woman trapped in a world of drugs. Deputy Dist, Attorney Charles J. Middleton, who prosecuted the case, brushed aside Monroe's claim of jury bias and said the defendant was convicted only on the facts of the case. During the trial, Alfaro testified that she was a drug addict and was high the day Autumn was killed. Accompanied by her 14-month-old son and 2 men, she said she went to the house that day to burglarize it for drug money. She said she left her son outside with the men, one of whom Millard pointed out had just been released from prison, while she went into the house. Autumn recognized Alfaro as being her older sister's friend and let her in to use the bathroom. Once inside, Alfaro found a knife while going through the kitchen, prosecutors said. Autumn was playing with crayons and cutting papers when Alfaro lured her into the bathroom to get the girl to help her clean an eyelash curler. There, Alfaro stabbed the child several times, prosecutors said. However, she maintained throughout her trial that the man who drove her to the house did the actual killing. She refused to name that person. Prosecutors said Alfaro never mentioned a man in the house until she was assigned a defense lawyer. Even then, they said it wasn't until someone asked her if there was another person inside the house that Alfaro came up with her claim that there had been an accomplice. Investigators could find no evidence that anyone besides Alfaro and Wallace's family members had been in the house that day, but they did find Alfaro's fingerprints in the bathroom and a blood-stained shoe print, matching what prosecutors said were the shoes she wore that afternoon. Middleton contended that Alfaro killed Autumn because she was the only witness to the burglary. Alfaro will join 2 other women on death row. Maureen McDermott, a former Los Angeles registered nurse who was convicted in 1990 of hiring a co-worker to murder her roommate so she could collect on a $100,000 mortgage insurance policy, and Cynthia Lynn Kaufman, 30, a St. Louis woman who was convicted of the 1986 kidnap murder of a woman in San Bernardino. The 3 are the only women in California to receive death sentences since 1978, when capital punishment was restored. An attorney for María del Rosio Alfaro, who could face the death penalty after being convicted of killing a 9-year-old Anaheim girl, on Monday said his client was a victim of the dreaded disease of drugs and was oblivious of the crime she committed. Defense attorney William M. Monroe, in an opening statement during the penalty phase of Alfaro's trial, painted the 20-year-old convicted killer as a woman-child whose lifestyle led to tragedy. Last week, jurors convicted Alfaro of first-degree murder for stabbing Autumn Wallace 57 times in the bathroom of the child's home on June 15, 1990. Although the conviction could bring the death penalty, Monroe is seeking a sentence of life in prison without parole. Tamara Benedict, 20, was one of 7 witnesses called by the defense attorney. She testified that Alfaro often worked as a prostitute in exchange for cocaine and heroin, shooting up as much as 50 times a day for weeks at a time. During cross-examination, Benedict told Deputy Dist. Editor Charles J. Middleton said that she and Alfaro would often sleep with drug dealers to support their expensive habits. "We had no jobs at all," she said. "Sometimes we would steal from stores or get someone to steal for us." Some jurors appeared shocked at Benedict's testimony, which included a matter-of-fact description of how the girls would mix cocaine and heroin to lengthen the drug's high. Alfaro, wearing a floral blouse and blue stretch pants, cried throughout. Benedict, her childhood friends, boyfriend Manuel Cueva, and her mother, Sylvia Melendez Alfaro's testimonies. María Alfaro sobbed when Cueva described her children's visits to county jail, where she is being held while awaiting sentence. Sylvia Alfaro testified that her daughter started her life of drugs and prostitution when she was about 12 years old, becoming progressively worse until the birth of her first child, Daniel. María Alfaro enrolled in several drug treatment programs but would always go back to her drug habit after several months, her mother said. During her pregnancies, however, María Alfaro usually managed to control her drug addiction. At one point, Sylvia Alfaro sent her daughter to live with a grandmother in Mexico, hoping the lifestyle would help her kick her drug habit. But when she came back, there was no change. By the time she was 15, María Alfaro was out of control, her mother said. She wore heavy makeup and black clothes and was always dirty, said the mother, who choked back tears several times during the trial. She didn't care how she looked. Earlier, Superior Court Judge Theodore E. Millard agreed to prosecutors' request to bar 2 witnesses from testifying during the sentencing hearing. The defense was hoping to call Norman Morian, a sentencing consultant, to talk about the conditions of the prison system for inmates sentenced to life without parole. She stabbed the victim, a witness in a drug-related home robbery, 57 times. She could face the death penalty. A jury took less than 4 hours Monday to convict an Anaheim woman of fatally stabbing a 9-year-old girl, the only witness to a drug-related home robbery. María del Rosio Alfaro, 20, stabbed Autumn Wallace, 57, times in the bathroom of her Anaheim house on June 15, 1990. The girl was at home after school, waiting for her mother to return from work, when she opened the door for Alfaro, who knew her older sister. The jury convicted Alfaro of first-degree murder with 2 exceptional circumstances: commission of the crime in the course of a burglary and the course of a robbery. Either of the special circumstances can bring the death penalty. Alfaro was also found guilty separately of burglary, theft, and using a knife during the other crimes. As the jurors filed into the courtroom to announce their verdicts, one said, "This is the hard part." Alfaro began dabbing her eyes even before hearing the verdicts. She stood, holding the hand of her attorney as the murder verdict was read. Deputy Dist. Attorney Charles J. Middleton told Superior Court Judge Theodore E. Millard that he would call no witnesses during the penalty phase. Instead, he said, he would introduce a school photo of Autumn and address the jury. Defense attorney William M. Monroe said that because of the viciousness, the heinousness of the crime, the task of saving Alfaro from the gas chamber is monumental. During the penalty phase, the jury will recommend to the judge a death sentence or life in prison without the possibility of parole. Much of the prosecution's case was built around a 412-hour videotaped interrogation of Alfaro by 2 sheriff's investigators 2 weeks after the killing. Alfaro, sobbing throughout the tape, said that on the day of the killing, she was wired on cocaine and heroin. With 2 male friends and her infant son, she drove to the Wallace home to rob it, knowing that Autumn would be alone, she said. At the house, Autumn recognized Alfaro as a friend of her older sister, April Wallace, and let Alfaro in to use the bathroom. On her way through the house, Alfaro said, she grabbed a knife from a kitchen drawer and, after thinking about what to do for a few moments while in the bathroom, called Autumn to help her clean her eyelash curlers. "That's when I did it," Alfaro told the investigators. "I stabbed her, 'cause she knew who I was." The girl did not resist and made no sound when she was attacked, Alfaro said, and no one else participated in the stabbing. Alfaro said the stolen goods from the house, including a portable television, a video recorder, clothes, and Autumn's typewriter, were sold for about $250. The prosecution also introduced 109 items of physical evidence, including Alfaro's fingerprint taken from the house, her footprint in blood on the floor of the bathroom, and her blood-stained shoes. Autumn's mother, Linda Wallace, flanked by 2 surviving daughters, said the jurors did a great job and made the right decision. "I'm just glad it's half over, and I'm looking forward to the end of this. I want to see her get the death penalty. That's what she deserves for what she did. If she gets life in prison, I'll accept that. It's been a long 2 years, and it's a great relief to have it half over with." Middleton said the verdict was not unexpected because the evidence is so overwhelming regarding the guilt. Monroe called no witnesses in Alfaro's defense but argued that the murder was committed by one of the 2 men who went with her to rob the home. Rosie Alfaro may have stabbed little Autumn Wallace, but she did not kill her, Monroe told the jury.